So in this segment, we're kind of going to go over the basics of shooting backplates for CGI purposes. So right now, I'm having my car as a stand-in model, and the whole point of this is to kind of show the basics of when you're shooting backplates, what to pay attention to and what to think of. So what I'm keeping in mind is if I was to shoot a car like we have here, how would I frame the backplates? So me personally, kind of like with CGI, same thing with backplates, is I like foreground elements, and I never like to have the car center. I like to use the rule of thirds. So if I was to just move the camera around for reference purposes, this right here would be a backplate. We have these elements down here as our foreground elements, some depth of field action, and then the car is in the top right. Now, what I also like to do is use trees and elements like that, like background elements. So let's say we go down here, and of course you would zoom in a little more, but then you frame a shot something like this. So you have the architecture in the background, you have the car centered, but you have all this other exciting things in the foreground, and maybe even something like this. And now we're using the shadows as a little sense of play, some direction, some artistic look. Now, the other visual you can do is kind of shooting through trees, something like this. And these are all kind of the things you want to think of is when you're shooting backplates for CGI is think about where the car would go. So shots like this would be fun. You have the building in the background, you have the greenery right here, and then the car is just in the corner. So I'm going to shoot this location in a second. I'm going to shoot shots like this, things that I'm showing in the video, and then we're going to incorporate the 3D model into these kind of backplates. So something like this is fun too. We have the foreground elements right here. You can go lower, something like this. So use the environment around you to kind of frame the car, and also keep in mind of where the car's going to go. And different focal lengths, different zoom effects, to get a little more depth of field. So a shot like this, I mean, unless you want to crop the car off, doesn't really work because we don't have a lot of road, we don't have anything exciting happening. So there's definitely do's and don'ts. You don't want trees and things growing out of the top of your car. Now, if we were to go something like this, it could work. Now, we go from the bottom like this, something like that could be fun. Going around, so the backside of this building. So like right here, they have like an arch. So let's see what framing something like this would look like. So okay, that's gonna be fun, and we'll have some directional shadows coming here, so that's cool looking. Something like this as well. You can get back a little more, frame it like that. So keep in mind, when shooting, where is the car gonna go? Don't just shoot random things. And when shooting also, do not shoot things like this. If you shoot backplates like this is absolutely boring. Right here, just going out in the open, just shooting basic images. This is what a lot of stock websites have. And while, yeah, it might work to put a car there, we're not really creating an art here. This is just a basic, here's a car in the background. So as a hobbyist, when you're shooting backplates, think about the creative aspects of it, not just putting a car in the middle of the road. Alright, so now I'm going to shoot the HDRI. So what I typically do is I level my tripod, so it's mandatory that it's perfectly leveled, and let's see how easy this focal point is to change. So on my little nodal head, I have this little little measurement thing. So level your camera perfectly straight, and then you want to point it at the brightest light source. So for today, this is the sun. So now my settings on the camera, I'm shooting, let's see if this will work. So I'm at f14, 8,000th of a second, and my camera will go ISO 64. I'm doing a bracket of 5, and I'm offsetting 3 exposures because I process 16-bit TIFFs. So now with that being said, I'm gonna fire away. And let's zoom in here. And the idea is the darkest exposure. This is really not showing up well on the camera, but let's see. No, I'll just show the images in the edit. But the point is, the darkest exposure is going to be kind of more or less a dot. And then the rest of them, it is what it is, whatever falls into place. I don't really care about overexposed shots since I'm really focused on neutral light and the light source. I don't overexpose my HDRI for reflection purposes, so if I don't get all the details in the shadows, I really don't care because it doesn't do anything for me. So now I just rotate it like so, fire off again. All right, there we go. Go again. And then what I personally like to do is retouch out the tripod. So whenever I go into an angle like this and I have my shadow, I kind of run out of the way to get no shadow of myself, so it's easier to take out the shadow of the tripod. There we go. Rotate it again. And so in a nutshell, we rotate around, then we look up, we look down, and that's your basic process of shooting the HDRI. So key points, make sure it's as dark as possible. Now the higher the f-stop, the more of a lens flare you get. So that's where you got to try to find a center balance spot where it's not too dark, or you try to go as dark as possible, but it's not giving you an obnoxious star because then it's an annoying reflection light source. So now that I have that, I'm just going to undo this, aim the camera at the sky, like so. Fire away, and then I'm going to shoot downward, and that's it. And then it's just a matter of shooting the back plates and we're done. So the other quick comment to mention, there's shadows in the environment. You want to make sure you get the sun in your shots if your car is going to have a sun hit it, so you're not having to fake it later on. So that's why, as you can see, my camera is positioned a little bit outside of the shadow just so I could get the natural sun hitting it. And we're done with shooting the HDRI, now it's backplate time. So now that we're back at home, we're going to start processing the stuff we've captured. My personal workflow is I don't color grade anything to have a look. I like to leave my HDRI and my backplate neutral, so that way nothing gets weird. I have learned through years of shooting in HDRIs, if you start doing some weird color grading, weird stuff could happen. And the other thing is, one thing I actually hate a lot is when people color grade the back plates, but then the HDRIs don't match. Now when you're rendering the car, your car doesn't match the tones of the background. Now you have to try to recreate what another user did. It doesn't match. Now all of a sudden your car doesn't look like it belongs in the environment. So my personal workflow is I leave everything as neutral as possible, and then go back to the drawing board later on, add a look and feel at the very end. Just like you would if you were to shoot a photograph. You shoot a car, you don't color grade on location on your camera or whatever. You shoot it, you come home, you process it, and then you, after all the retouching is done, you add a final look. So I try to incorporate that same workflow to CGI. So what I have now is I opened up all the shots we have. I go in, and it's very simple. I add a little, I remove chromatic aberration, remove the vignetting. I leave the distortion because I want that fisheye thing. I tone down the exposure just a little bit, just to darken it, just a hint. Go back to my other stuff. That's good. That's it. That's as much as I typically do. I don't do clarity. I don't do dehaze. I don't mess with this. I leave it as neutral as possible. I mean, you could darken the shadows a hint, not too much. You start doing too much of this, and all of a sudden, when you combine the HDRI together, you're going to get all kinds of weird banding. Things just start getting bizarre. So now that I have this done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just export out the 16-bit TIFF, so that way I can load it all in PTGUI and process it with all the dynamic range that I have here. So all I'm going to do is right-click, save images, select the folder you want to put it into, and here you got to make sure you leave it at 16-bit, not 8-bit, otherwise what's the point? So now I'm just going to click save and let this process away. Nothing more to be done here, so I'm going to pause the video while this slowly spits things out. All right, so that's processed. So now it's time to do the back plates. Very similar process as well. Load them all into Photoshop. And here, the back plates I do adjust a little bit more. So if they're a little overexposed, now here, as you can see, I was just dialing, so this image is useless. I could try to salvage it and just tone it down like this. There we go. Go in, take a look at all of these. Make sure nothing's weird happening. So this one was a little dark. Gonna open up the shadows a hint. Same thing with this one, just open up the shadows a bit.
Nothing too crazy. There we go. And then these were the reference shots that I took of my car as a stand-in, so you could have a sense of scale when putting in a CGI car. There we go. Now I'm going to select all of these and just tone down the highlights just a hint. And now what I'm going to do is go to the HDRI that we spit out and just take a look at what our white balance looks like. So as you can see, our ground here is a little warm compared to this. So all we have to do is select everything, press I. I'm going to click in the shadows. So that is a little cool. Let's compare what we have our building wall looking like. So that is a little more on the cool side compared to what our HDRI is. So I'm just going to warm it up just a hint. I'm trying to match them as close as possible so that way the color grading is the same. So there we go. That's it. And then of course, once you render it, you can add the warmth back in. So this is done. Not a problem. Now to process this, because I don't give out the raw stuff unless it's a private sale to a client, I just do scripts, image processing, JPEG, quality 10, resize 4000. So I'll include the 4000 with this tutorial so everyone could follow. Well, the next tutorial that's going to be rendering a car into the backplate HDRI. So now I'm going to hit run and this slowly processes. So I'm just going to pause it again. And then the next step will be doing the PT GUI aspect of it. All right, now those are done. I'm going to open up PT GUI, load my 16-bit TIFF images. All right, now that they are loaded, I'm just going to rotate them like this. Align. Yep, I believe that's it. Leave as is. Let it quickly group and process the HDRI alignment. There we go. All right, perfect. Perfect stitch. Now I'm going to run my little template to get rid of my tripod. There we go. Perfect. I'm going to run the optimizer. This is good. Whatever. Don't really care. And now I am just going to spit out the HDRI. So go to create panorama, 20,000, 2480. That's what I like to do. So building, that's what we'll call it. Nothing too crazy. All right, that's good. Now I'm just gonna pause it while this processes. All right, now I have the HDRI open in Photoshop. I'm just gonna do a little basic tweaks. Open up the exposure, collapse that. Then I'm going to lower the exposure, see how my sun is. So this light source is not good enough. I'm not going to have crisp shadows. I'm not going to do anything yet. I'm just going to remove that. All right, I'm going to run some actions to get my tripod removed completely and have a nice looking floor. And this is typically, the reason why I do this is it's not going to be seen in your renders. However, if artists, a lot of people that use like Keyshot or even Corona, they like to have the HDRI ground for their cars, so they render their cars into the HDRI. So if you have this, it looks nasty under the car, so I just remove it myself. And in all honesty, I just love the way a clean HDRI looks. So whenever someone has an HDRI that has that tripod removed or doesn't have it removed and either sells them or gives them out, it looks sloppy. This is 2021. The standards are a little high. Whoever leaves tripods in their HDRIs is just being lazy. As you can see, it takes a second to remove, not really a big deal. All right, so now I'm just going to remove that. I'm undoing it again. There we go. It's almost done. And now what I'm going to do is create a new layer, go in, quickly get rid of my shadow of the tripod. And this is why I ran out of the spot when I was shooting, so that way my shadow isn't in the frame. There we go. I'm just kind of skimming through. As you can see, it's nothing that you have to make extremely perfect, but even this looks better than having a shadow in frame. So just going in, quickly removing it. There we go. Little's here, little there. And just quickly click, click, click. Just get out of the shot. And we're almost done. There we go. Things are looking good. All right. Try not to go too close to the edge so that way we don't have any weird tiling problems. There we go. All right, merge that down. I'm going to save this. Oh, the other thing I'll do, oh, we'll see. No, I'll probably leave it as is, but we could take a quick look at this. So let's see. Yeah, I'll just leave it. A little Easter egg. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is downsize my HDRI to 8,000. I actually have an action for that as well, so I don't have to do that myself. All right, so I saved the HDRI. I'm going to do HDRI 8K. There we go. Then I have one for spitting out the JPEG. There we go. So we have that done. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick test of this HDRI in Photoshop, or not in Photoshop, in 3D Max to see how much my shadow is missing its dynamic range. And we're just going to quickly fix that problem. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to pause it real quick while I open up a quick test car. All right, so I just have a little teapot created. I loaded the HDRI into my V-Ray Dome. I use a multiplier of 30 by default, so whenever I expose my HDRIs in Photoshop, that's what I try to make it my my standard exposure, as long as your camera is set to 200, 5, 6, and 100. So now what I'm going to do is take a look at what we have here. Now, as you can see, this is the problem, and I can just flip it so it's apples to apples. Our shadow here is not what our shadow there is. So to fix this, it's actually very simple. I'm just going to open up the HDRI, and I'm going to open up the 8K one, really because the 20K just takes a while to open up either in Photoshop or in 3D Max when we do these updates. And typically what I'll do is I'll dial in the 8K and then apply the same to the 20K if I ever choose to use it. I rarely ever use 20,000 pixel HDRIs. I just spit it out because I can. Doesn't mean I have to use it. So what I'm doing here is I did an underexposure layer, and now I'm doing an another exposure on top, and just exposing the sun. There we go. And what I'll do is I'll add a little bit of blur action to it. So we're gonna blur it 3 times. Very simple. Then what I'll do is I'll move that under the exposure layer. Merge that down, save it. There we go. Go back into Photoshop. I'm going to reload. And this is all just guessing and eyeballing it. So I did a exposure value of 4. So there we go. That shadow is nice. It might be a little too intense. So 4 was nice, but it was a little too much. So we'll go to the history tab. We'll go to the merge down. We'll change this from, oh, that's the darkened one. All right, so we'll change it from 4 to 3. We really don't need that top layer anymore now that we isolated where the sun is. So there we go. We have a 3. I'm going to click reload, then press preview again. And there we go. I like the way this feels. We have a neutral tone of the ground. Teapot's not crazy hot. And we have a nice crisp shadow. That to me is good. If I ever want to do a little more, like while rendering in V-Ray, I'll just do the inverse gamma like 0.98, 0.95. That's typically my little go-to to just add a little bit more snap to it. But otherwise, I'm going to leave that HDRI as is. So 1, 1, done. All right, so that's how I get my HDRIs processed. So we did an exposure of 3. So now I'm just going to open up the master HDRI, which is that 20K one. I'm going to pause this while it opens. All right, same thing. Go down, underexpose, create a new one, invert the selection, zoom in where the sun is, add another, or invert that. Oh, okay. So we'll just do it like this. There we go. There we go. Filter, blur. There we go. Delete that. Go down, save it, and we're done. And that in a nutshell is how I do my whole process of shooting the backplates, processing the HDRIs in the backplates, and then stitching the HDRI, and then adjusting that exposure of the sun to make sure it's matching what we shot here. And so that's it. Next tutorial will be rendering a CGI car into the backplate we shot.